We're now less than 1 month away from the first Republican presidential debate, which functions as the unofficial starter's gun of the 2024 race. The debate is likely already a do-or-die moment for several campaigns, most notably those of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former Vice President Mike Pence, both of whom are sort of limping as we get to the starting gate. DeSantis is in the midst of a long-running overhaul of his campaign. Never a good sign when you've only been in the race for just a few months. If he doesn't perform well in the debate, it could well mean the end, or at least the beginning of the end, for DeSantis. Yes, that quickly. Pence is even in worse shape, having not even qualified to make the debate stage, still struggling to find the 40,000 donors he needs to do it. While his advisors insist that he will be there eventually, the fact that he is struggling as a former vice president speaks to the fundamental lack of appeal in his candidacy. Now, on the other end of the momentum spectrum is South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, who's riding an early advertising blitz in the early states to double-digit support and polling in Iowa and South Carolina. Scott's relentlessly positive messaging is also paying dividends, although he's likely to be tested in the coming weeks as his Republican opponents begin to take shots at him out of their own opposition research books. And then there's Donald Trump. Through it all, he remains steady and steadily way ahead of the rest of the field. It's not entirely clear to me how any of the candidates ranking beneath him plan to make up such a sizable gap in the relatively short period of time before the first votes in Iowa come January 15th. But without further ado, let's get to my rankings of the 10 candidates most likely to wind up as the Republican nominee. Let's start with number 10, Will Hurd. Look, you could easily talk me into Miami Mayor Francis Suarez in this spot, since neither he nor Hurd, who is a former member of Congress from Texas, have any shot at winning or even becoming a factor in this race. I defaulted to Hurd in this spot because I think he's what the Republican Party's future could have looked like if Trump didn't exist. A biracial relative moderate talking about solutions and policy in a serious and conservative way. Number 9, Asa Hutchinson. It's very hard for me to see the former Arkansas governor making the debate stage in August. To date, he's raised $743,000 from just over 6,000 donors, well short of the 40,000 he needs to qualify. And if he doesn't make that debate stage, I'm just not sure how and for how long he stays in the race. It's not looking good. Number 8, Doug Burgum. Look, the North Dakota governor has already overperformed my expectations for him. He says he's qualified for the debate stage next month. Now, Burgum did it by sending out gift cards to anyone who gave him $1 or more, but hey, whatever works. Burgum is also independently wealthy. He's donated $10 million of his own to the race so far, which means he can stay in the race longer than candidates who aren't self-funders. I assume that means he'll be in the race at least through Iowa next year. Number 7, Mike Pence. I've never understood this candidacy, other than that it's born of the necessity of saying that he got to run for president at some point in his life. Pence is hated by the Trump base and deeply distrusted by the anti-Trump forces within the party. He really is a man without a country. His poor fundraising, just over $1 million raised, speaks to the utter lack of energy and interest in Pence's campaign. Look, Pence may make the debate stage next month with a massive push, but I'm sure it doesn't really matter. His campaign is dead in the water already. Number 6, Christie. So a whole lot of the Republican base hates him, and it's hard to see any sort of path to the nomination for the former New Jersey governor. At the same time, at least he has a theory of the case in the race. He's going to be the anti-Trump figure, calling out the former president on anything and everything he says and does. And Christie is showing signs of life in New Hampshire with his message and will, I predict, be one of the standouts in next month's debate. There's something there, although I suspect the Christie constituency is probably too small to truly matter. Number 5, Nikki Haley. So Haley supporters will tell you that the former South Carolina governor has yet to begin spending in a major way on TV, and therefore she can't be judged against the likes of Tim Scott, who has already spent heavily on TV ads. Which, maybe. But seen in another light, Haley is missing her opportunity, as DeSantis continues to stumble and bumble, to emerge as the most viable alternative to him. Haley still has considerable gifts as a candidate. She's very charismatic and should do well in the debate, but it feels a bit like she's an afterthought in the race, at least right now. Number 4, Vivek Swami. So Swami is making his first run for office, and he continues to surprise, at least me. He was in 4th in Iowa in a new Fox poll, and nationally he is now running 3rd, tied with former Vice President Pence. Swami seems likely to gain even more support from that August debate, particularly if, as expected, Trump doesn't show up. Swami will wind up being a sort of stand-in for Trumpism, which we already know is very popular within the Republican base. Now, I'm not sure Swami can actually compete for the nomination. I'm not there yet, but I do think he still has room to grow in this race. Number 3, Ron DeSantis. So what evidence do we have that voters actually want what DeSantis is selling? I think DeSantis and his team vastly overestimated the degree to which a war on woke would win over primary voters, and the extent to which saying he wanted to make the rest of the country like Florida would have an appeal outside of, well, Florida. DeSantis has been steadily trending downward in national and early state polling, his money situation is far from great, and he's rebooting his campaign again. Given all of that, it's impossible for me to keep him in the top two. Speaking of the top two, number 2, Tim Scott. Scott's charisma, positive message, and deep campaign war chest, he's got $21 million in the bank, have combined to make him the fastest riser in the 2024 race. That was, though, the easy part. Now Scott has to do 2 things. 1, weather attacks from his opponents, who have by and large ignored him to this point. And 2, find a way to start drawing blunt contrast between himself and Trump. That latter thing may be very difficult for Scott, since he's never had to go negative in a race, as he's always been easily reelected. That won't happen this time around. And number 1, drumroll please, Donald Trump. There's just no signs that the former president is slowing down in the race. With the 3rd indictment seemingly imminent, the party has already begun to rally around him again. It seems very unlikely that the indictment, assuming it happens, will be the thing that slows his momentum. Although honestly, at this point, who the hell knows? Unlike 2016 and even 2020, Trump has serious people leading his campaign, and they are building real organizations in early states. He won without those things, and with a much smaller lead in 2016. So what? This race is still Donald Trump's to lose, which doesn't mean he can't lose it, but it's looking increasingly unlikely that he does so.